Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's event. I want to thank you for joining us. My name is Dan Tomaszewski with Everything MSP, and I'm very excited to have you here today. We've got an incredible session lined up. It's a session that every MSP, whether you're scaling, you're planning for the future, or you're simply trying to build a healthier business, absolutely needs to hear this. Today's webinar is Know Your Worth, Realize Your Vision by Creating Company Value. And we're joined by somebody who's helped countless partners transform how they think about business value, profitability, as well as long term strategy. In just a couple moments here, we'll bring in our guest speaker, who is Brian Davies, who is the Value Creation Coaching Program Manager with Pax8. Brian's worked directly with MSPs to help them understand what drives valuation, which is so critical for MSPs, why it matters long before you plan to sell, which is even more important. And most importantly, how to build a business that's profitable, scalable, and aligned to your long term vision. And, today's session, Brian's going to break down the real factors that influence what your company is worth, from leadership and culture, from service gross margin, pricing, financial discipline, and the difference between growing and truly scaling. He's also going to dig into how improving just a few key metrics can unlock massive value over time. So, whether your goal is to eventually sell, pass your business on, become a non operating owner, or simply build a business that creates more freedom and less stress, because we all would love less stress. This material is absolutely foundational. So, with that being said, I want to welcome Brian. How are you doing today, Brian?
Great, thanks. It's a nice sunny day, so right. Hopefully, I'm in
Yeah,
Colorado. Hopefully, we get a little bit more snow, which I think is in the forecast. And yeah, it's a good day.
awesome. It's great to have you here. You are with Pax8 Academy, and for any of our audience, that might not be familiar with you, if you could
Yeah,
give, just a quick overview of your role at Pax8 Academy and how long you've been with the organization.
yeah. So I've been with Academy, Pax8 Academy, shortly after they were C-level coaching, which is our original coaching practice was bought by Pax8. So it's a little over 4 years now. And prior to that, I had run my own MSP in Western Colorado. I've also worked for a couple different companies, IBM as an outsourcer, right? Developing process and procedure for outsourcing. We also did a highly funded MSP that serviced .com businesses, their back-end infrastructure, and I built the operations for that group. And then from there, right, worked with a PE roll-up of a Microsoft bar. So I've been through a lot of different
Yeah.
iterations. I've been through the M&A iterations as well, and my passion and purpose really turned into being combining my love for teaching and love for helping other people be successful.
Well, two things to note. One, number one, you mentioned the passion, and I love that because we all need to find that passion in our lives and pursue that. And and like I say to people that work for me, I don't expect you to jump out of bed and do somersaults and say, "I'm going to work," right? But I do want you to feel good about what you do,
That's right.
and feel like you're making a good contribution, and it all comes down into here, that passion. So
Absolutely.
I love that. And the other thing too that's so notable is just you being a former MSP. Hats off to Pax8 for recognizing that kind of value, and bringing people
Mhm.
on, to help educate their client base with somebody that's been in the trenches, that's doing what they do, because you know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes
Well,
all the difference in the world.
a lot of what we do in value creation coaching and the value creation coaching coaches um, really believe, right, that having been through the trenches, there's a better way to live life running an MSP than a lot of us currently have.
Right. Exactly. And so, without further ado, let's jump in. Let's kick things off, and
Yeah.
let's jump into our content for today. So, I'm gonna go ahead and turn the stage over to you.
All right. Well, thanks. And feel free to interrupt, right? Love to have the questions and the dialogue, and we'll go
Yeah.
that way. So, my name, here's my LinkedIn address if anybody wants to get hold of me. But of course, if you know PAX 8, you can always call PAX 8 and say, what about coaching? And they'll get you in touch with us. A thing to know about Academy is we provide a lot of different educational offerings, from on-demand courses to instructor-led training. We do some peer groups, right? And then we have coaching. And at all those coaching engagements, we have the value creation coaching, which is my program, specifically designed to addressing the question we're talking today. How do we increase value in our company? And why would we want to increase value in our company? So I think it's important, right? We talk a lot about this. You go to a trade show and you're going to hear a lot of valuation discussions. What did you get? And I think it's good to level set with what is valuation. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's what somebody's willing to offer us and it's what we're willing to sell for. So, not all valuation is always the same, right? And it's more than just a multiple of our EBITDA. The multiple of our EBITDA is really what we use when we're at that conference or we're at a cocktail party and, hey, I got 10x or I got 5x or whatever it might be. Um, right. But we want to think about valuation as really being something that's arrived at, not something that's just a industry standard. Okay. The other thing that we often have conversations with our partners is if it's worth selling, right? It's also worth keeping.
Right.
So don't just go to look to get rid of something, and hey, somebody gave me an offer, so I'm going to sell, right? Maybe it's worth keeping, hanging on to it, and doing something else with it. So there's more to it than just plain old what's valuation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really opens your eyes to where you're at today. Because I think we all think our businesses are worth a gazillion dollars, right? And maybe we're correct. If we're truly staying on top of our valuations and really looking at those financials, but maybe we're so far off that we have more work to do. And if you wait till you're ready to sell and you realize that it may not be that nest egg for retirement that you had anticipated. Is that the time that you want to roll up your sleeves and continue to work even more harder when you were ready to walk away?
Yeah. No, right. The whole premise and the reason why we're passionate about this topic is you need to start now. Even if you don't think you're going to do something, you need to start now. I have a good friend and owner that I work with, been working with for a while, and he's not interested in doing anything in the next foreseeable future. But we're working on building that value because change happens. We
Right.
don't know when this change is going to happen. Um, right? Life changes, economic changes. There's a number of different things, and we don't want to find ourselves in the position of having to compromise just because we had a change forced on us. You want to
Yeah,
be able to maximize your value at any point in time.
absolutely.
Uh, yeah. So here's some things on why valuation matters. The other thing that I was looking at a statistic recently in terms of best in class performance. Those MSPs and companies that are performing at the best in class level, they're growing. They have twice the amount of growth that everybody else has. Three quarters of the industry have. And that's a really profound statistic. So when we're talking about growth, we also want to have that valuation in mind, because it's going to enable that overall growth. And so if your goal is growth, think of it through the lens of valuation.
You had mentioned, valuation, isn't just about selling. We talked a little bit about this, but, what, what does building value mean for the MSP that had plans to keep the business for the long term? Can you go a little bit
Perfect.
more deeper into that?
Yeah. I think it's right. I think it's that last bullet set, the but also. When we have value in our company, right? We've done the things, we have the systems and everything in place. We have freedom, and that freedom translates into what do you want to do? As an owner, you have freedom to invest your time more in the company, but you also have the freedom to maybe do something else, maybe a passion project like volunteering at a local organization. When you have value in the company, right, you can be flexible as to when something comes up. Is it another peer group member maybe that you've been talking to for a number of years, and now there's a really tight synergy between you two, and you want to get together and try to make the business bigger? Um, Often we hear about people, they can't find the right talent. Well, guess what? When your business is being well run and things are clicking, talent's going to come to you.
Yeah.
So valuation touches on all these different aspects. So even if you're not interested in selling now, but you're thinking about protecting the value and you're working towards building that value, you have the freedom and ability to really start to build a business beyond maybe your wildest dreams.
And that's the thing is, knowing what those your long-term goals are, right?
Yeah.
Because again, it is that planning that is so critical, and we should all know what that exit strategy is. And there's so many, and that exit strategy doesn't necessarily have to be one exit strategy. You could have a couple methods. Your
Mhm.
thought process might be that I'm going to sell to someone, maybe to another MSP.
Yep.
Maybe you determine that you have a family member, maybe a son or daughter that's
Mhm.
grown up. They've grown up in the family of of MSP ownership, and maybe they determine that they want to jump in. And so, I
Yep.
think there's different scenarios that can have an impact on all that.
Yeah. A common scenario we hear about is, I've got a trusted employee that's helped me build this business, and they
Yes.
want to take it over, right?
Right.
And so all of those are considerations and options. And talking about that long-term legacy or long-term thinking, this, what is, how much does it matter? So let's quantify, right? What doing something now versus doing something later. If I have a $2.5 million company, and if I'm just earning a 9.8% EBITDA, then that's after you pay yourself a fair wage, right? So adjusted.
Right.
If I were to sell that at a 7x value, I'm going to have, right, $245,000 a year in income for 10 years. Um,
Yeah.
I probably want to be selling that when I'm 60, 65, because, right, 10 years is not a long time. But if we just simply were to increase that average EBITDA, the adjusted EBITDA, a couple of points there to, right, the median level, you've almost increased your 10-year payout by $50,000 a year. I didn't put this in here to say you should be thinking about 10 years, or right, but if I'm
Yeah.
thinking about what next, the value of that little bit of change has a big difference on those payouts.
What would you say is the biggest mistake that an MSP owner makes when it comes to creating the company value?
So I think it's looking at it through the lens of, if I do one thing, I'm going to adjust the value. So the biggest thing, right, is beginning with the end in mind. Stephen Covey. Where do
Yeah.
we want to go? And this is, you're talking to about, do we want to, right, pass it on to somebody else? But what is the vision that we have? What's the long-term vision? Where do you want to be? Do you want to be on the beach? Do you want to be retired with your family? Do you want to keep working until you don't? So the number one mistake is not articulating and having a vision. And that is over and over again. We talk with owners too late, too late in the game. And I'm trying to, they're trying to create a vision now. Um, and it's just too late, right? You needed to do that a while ago. And by the way, when we create a vision, it's okay for it to sound a little bit hokey, like I want to be living in Hawaii and not having to do a lot of work,
Right.
right? That's an okay goal. That's your
Yeah.
vision. It's a personal thing, right? So think about that. And then once we have the vision, creating the plan. And then once you have the plan, right, understanding that you need to have to address all of these different things to in order to reach that vision, right, in order to satisfy that plan. And so our coaching looks at the business holistically. And we're really thinking about the business in these 7 lenses, if you will, or these 7 outcomes. And we want to have, right? So you start with leadership. We have company culture. Do we have a company that everybody's excited about being in, right? It's a family. It could be, right, a tight family, could be a bad family, but do we have the culture that can support the growth or the pressures that come at us? Do we have the ability to scale? Ability to scale is, do we have the process and procedures so that when we hire somebody, we're not saying, watch how I do this for a couple of months, but we can give them a manual on how to do something. We
Right.
can expect good right away, right? We can build that in. The right revenue. So are we selling a tight technology stack to a tight target client? Or are we selling everything to everybody? Do we have them on recurring agreements? Do we have them on 3-year locked recurring agreements? Um, so, right, there's a lot that goes even into the right revenue, but are we paying attention to that? Do we have the right service gross margin on our labor? Are we using the 4 levers to really maximize, right, our resources? Well, but at the same time, being mindful that we're a human driven business. We can't give up the customer care component of how we interact with our clients. Do we have the financial discipline? Are we looking at everything on a monthly basis, a regular cadence? Do we understand what the roadmap is financially? And if we do all of those, ideally, we're getting best in class results. But you know what? We can do all 6 of those and still have to tend the garden in order to get the right growth that we want.
Yeah.
Right? And that gets to the best in class results.
So when you take a look at those 7 value creators, so if an MSP owner, could only focus on one of those first, which one would you recommend and why would that be?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think ultimately the answer is in leadership. Um, but I think it's leadership and it's leadership and because I can be the best leader or think I'm the best leader, but I need to have the culture that supports that type of engagement. And so I start with leadership because as a leader, I have the most influence on culture and I need to keep tending to that culture. If I'm going to build my scale or build the processes so I can scale, we're going to need leadership to get through that. Companies that approach it simply through a management lens of do this are more likely to fail. And leadership, by the way, doesn't mean that they have a title. It
Right.
can be a person anywhere in the company that's providing good leadership. And
Yep.
so, do we have the right leadership to be able to have the ability to get through these other things?
Yeah, and I think too, I don't know what book I got this from, but the true sign of a good leader is one that can walk away from the business, whether that be taking a week off, 2 weeks off, or there's some kind of an emergency and things don't fall apart. They continue on, and and that is so critical. And that's truly a cultural foundational component of that leader.
Yeah.
And so let's talk a little bit more about that leadership. Given that is so key to the valuation,
Yeah.
how can MSP owners start building a leadership team that can run that business without them?
So I love, I don't know what book that was that you read it in, but right, one of the tests of leadership that I'll recommend to people is take a vacation, leave your cell phone and laptop behind, right? Make it a week.
Ooh, can you see the sweat pouring off of all of our listeners' heads right now?
That's right. Just
Thinking,
like,
I
oh
mean,
man.
I could not imagine if I were to tell my wife and kids that we're going on vacation and I am leaving all my gadgets and my laptop behind. I think they would probably think that I'm sick. Not
Yep.
because I need it, because I feel like I have the right people in the right, in the right seats, but it's
Yeah.
just always that fear of the unknown where it's just how we're wired, right? But to walk away without all that, oh, that's scary.
Yeah. So, right. So that's the test. Can you do that for a week? And then next time, can you do it for 2 weeks?
Right.
One of our coaches has a great story about how he was feeling like he was burnt out, and he had tended to his leadership team. He had done these things on the slide, right? He's empowered them to make decisions. He's given them the freedom to kind of develop in their roles without over managing them. And he took a sabbatical to Costa Rica. And it was at that point in time when he came back, and they really didn't, right, miss a beat while he was gone, that he knew that he had accomplished what he'd set out to accomplish. So,
Yeah.
right, just like our vision, have a idea of what you want your leadership team to look like and how you want them to act, and set the expectation. The biggest lesson I learned in developing leaders is I also, as a leader, have to be willing to let them fail and work through the consequences as a learning opportunity, not as a you messed up opportunity. And that's
Right.
how we're going to be good at developing our leaders.
Excellent.
You know, going back to leaders as well and culture, we've mentioned vision. Where do we want to go? Right. But also our mission and values. And this is really key. If we have a team of leaders, that's all really good, but we need them to be aligned. We need them to be all working for the same effort. Um, Boys in the boat, right? If you think about an 8-man rowing boat, they all have to be pulling precisely, each stroke matched with their partners in order to get the maximum speed and win that competition. It's really incredible the detail that goes into that type of thing. And it's the same thing in our business. And so we need the mission to be clear. What am I trying to execute on today, this year? And how am I going to behave to get to there? Right. So, what is our mission and what are the values? And when we have a mission, vision, values driven organization, we actually get some relief from making decisions all the time because it turns into how would you make that decision based on our values? Does it align with our mission? Once everybody has clarity of what they're trying to do and how they're supposed to act, right, things become a little easier and you build that momentum. And that momentum is really critical to that valuation component. A buyer is going to value a company that has a strong culture, vision, and mission more than a company that's just going through the motions.
Yeah. And think about it from this perspective. If you had a potential buyer come in and do maybe um, an anonymous tour of your facility, you just got someone in. We'll just call it a friend, so you're not freaking out any of the staff members. A friend coming in and in chatting with you and looking and seeing how the help desk is operating, how operations are going, how the front end of the office, the back office are running. What would they think? Just I think it's always a good exercise, you know, just to think through from that perspective.
Yeah.
Um, because then you can look at and see where do we need to make changes, and and start making that list
Yeah.
because the time is now.
Yeah. Another great test. We often, a lot of people will go through the exercise of developing their vision, mission, and values, and we put a poster on the wall. And I love, right? I'm a business geek, so I love going into an organization and saying, "Hey, what are your values?" And when they go to look at the wall or the desk, no, 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 just tell me your values.
Right.
What
Yep.
what's your mission? Don't look at the wall, right? Tell me your mission. When you have an organization and everybody in that organization can immediately answer that question of values and mission and vision, knowing it by heart, they believe it. They are
Yeah.
bought in to what you're trying to do. And that buy-in is worth 10 people for every one that you have.
Yeah. It's that culture is made up of everybody within that organization, and and people see that, and listen to your clients too,
Mhm.
um, because the how they view your culture, um, perception is reality.
Yeah. Oftentimes, a good way for companies that are struggling with what they're about, their identity, I'll recommend doing client interviews, and they might find something about themselves that they didn't know.
Yeah.
It's a great way to get information.
Before you jump into this next section here, I do have another question about culture,
Yeah.
because it often can just feel intangible. And
Mm.
how would you say that a strong MSP culture can translate into those real dollars when it comes to the valuation? Because we're not talking about sales, what your MRR is, what the length of your contracts have been, what your turnover looks like, whether it be clients or staff. We're talking about culture, which again, it just feels intangible.
Yeah. It does feel a little bit intangible when you're trying to evaluate it because you've got a third party trying to make observations, right? And like I said, I can come in and I can ask the questions. It takes a little bit of time and investment to really understand the culture, but where you're going to see it in terms of valuation percolate is the clients that we have are the raving fan clients. The clients that we have are all going to be not maybe highly profitable, but definitely certainly profitable. The consistency that we have in delivery is always going to satisfy them because we both know how we're working together, right? And that's
Right.
where values and mission start to lean into that. So you can translate this back to an actual result of profitability, satisfaction by the clients, engagement, length of engagement, churn, right? Those would be some metrics you could start to pull out and pull from that because a company that doesn't have a strong culture is going to have a higher churn. They're going to have a bigger dispersion of clients that some are not making any money and some are making a lot of money.
Right.
They're going to have differences in customer satisfaction. And you know what? The other aspect of measuring culture would be our own employee turnover,
Yeah.
right? We're reticent to jettison employees that don't fit because we think, oh, well, I still need somebody to do this job. Companies that have really strong culture, the people that don't fit aren't there.
Yeah.
And right, they mature and they develop that way. So those are going to be metrical ways that you can maybe evaluate this, but right, I think you've been in organizations. I know I've worked in organizations where when the culture is good, we know,
Yeah.
right? That's a good success.
Absolutely.
So scale, one of the 7 value drivers. I was talking with an owner just a couple of days ago. Uh, they didn't have great net profit. Uh, and their idea was, I need to sell. I need to sell my way out of this. Um, so the question I asked was, okay, if you sell everything you want to sell, what's going to happen to your current client base or what's going to happen to your client base? Can you deliver as much as you want to sell into? And they stopped to think a little bit about it and said, well, maybe not, right? Growing, I can grow. I can keep increasing my revenue. I can increase my customer base and I can throw bodies at the problem. And we might get to a point where that feels good. We're a large organization now, but are we actually truly scaling? And I think often in the story about the owner, I just want to illustrate is often the conversation is, I need to grow. Well, if we focus on scale, we can grow, right, without higher client churn. We can grow with higher client satisfaction because we've increased our ability to service that. And so, right, getting people thinking about that growth versus scale is really important. We want to do more business with less people.
So, when we look at it from that perspective, can you just maybe elaborate a little bit more about why scaling is more valuable than simply growing the revenue?
Sure. Um, at the risk of offending people, like time and
Yeah.
materials is a good business. It's a really good business. I've worked with some clients that are making a lot of money, have big revenue, time and materials.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't scale. Why?
Yeah.
Because if I'm going to work an hour on a client, right, I'm going to bill an hour and I need the right number of bodies to continue growing that enterprise. There have been some very large tech companies built that way. So fine. But if I want to actually, um, have more clients than I have techs, I want to be able to do that. I need to look for scale. I'm going to look for some efficiencies in how I do things. The managed service business model is predicated on that ability to scale. I'm delivering services at a fixed fee agreement, no longer time and materials. So I can't afford to just send a body out for every hour that I'm going to do work. I need to
Right.
find those efficiencies and I need to be able to maximize them. And the efficiencies are going to come from process and process consistency, understanding if that process is yielding the right thing, meaning is it spinning off the right metrics, right? And then my RPA and automation, and now coming up quickly, AI.
Hmm.
Am I leveraging those aspects to really be able to provide the same level of service that got me my clients in the first place, but be able to bring in more people? Oftentimes, when we think about right growing versus scaling, when we go through and we find that we have a service delivery team of, let's say, 10 people, and the feeling is we're just maxed out, we need to hire more people. When we apply processes and we really start to break it apart and we start to stabilize that environment from chaos to stability, we find that we have a lot of capacity. Now we're scaling, right?
Yeah.
Our engineers are more relaxed, they're able to do things. And that would be an indication of we're doing the right thing, we're scaling.
That's great, and it's just that whole mindset of switching from the one to one to one to many.
Mhm.
And I've been in the industry for quite some time. I remember those early days of break fix, and having multiple technicians and multiple vehicles, and that windshield time is extremely expensive. You got one technician going out, handling one particular incident or issue, whereas you could have one person in an office doing the work remotely, being proactive, and I think that's the key where, um, and I'll go with your statement of trying not to offend anybody, but I think a lot of MSPs still today, they are called an MSP, but they truly aren't being that proactive technology service provider like
Right.
they should. And what it really means, because when you are, let me say when you're not, you have that label of MSP, but you're still focusing on putting out fires. And when you're being proactive and you're truly focusing on how can I, mitigate these issues? How can I keep the client from having this issue in the future? You're squashing those issues, and you're able to do that for multiple clients, which allows you to be so much more profitable, increase that stickiness. And I mean, you're totally right. I mean, that is how you scale.
Yeah. Uh, you know, I think I'm trying to think. I was a firefighter for a long time, and right, fire departments scale because there's fire protection.
Mm,
They don't scale because they're right putting out. If they were just having to put out fires all the time and there wasn't the protection or wasn't the prevention aspect of it, it would be an unscalable service.
right.
And I kind of think of MSPs, right? The ideal is I want to prevent everything from happening. I want my clients and their users to have the most uptime because their job to be done is make money for their business. That's not a technology, right? It's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right? It's something else. So there's a lot of impact into that scale. But again, there's nothing wrong with like doing a time and materials.
Yeah.
It's just a
Yep.
different way of scaling. So think
Right.
right if we're thinking about that and we're thinking about where we want to get to in valuation, right? So to tie it back to valuation, scale has more value. Um, if it's a time and materials business, that valuation is going to be driven on expanding the footprint of clients. If I have a scalable business, that valuation is going to be based on the amount of profit I can make.
Right. And also just taking a look at, you threw up a number of an organization doing, 2.5 million. If let's say only 20% of that is MRR, maybe 15% of it's MRR, that valuation is going to look drastically different than if 80, 90% of it's MRR. So you want to focus on, okay, how can I, look at my existing client base and convert them to managed, so that because every one I convert to managed, it's going to have that, that increase in the valuation, right?
Yeah. I mean, so, right. So this goes to the right revenue trait or driver. And just so we're clear, if I'm selling product only, there's really no value in that. It's actually for every dollar of product I sell, the valuation is going to be cents on the dollar.
Right.
Um, if I'm selling time and materials, it might be not quite a dollar to a dollar. It's right now, I think it's around 0.8 for time and materials type of work. So it's a little less than a dollar valuation. If I'm selling a recurring managed service, I can get 1.5 to 1.8 value to that dollar of managed services that I sold. And that's the actual valuation difference.
Yeah.
And so that goes to this slide here, right? Do I have the right revenue? Do I have the right client? Are the clients valuing that proactive service more than the time and material service, right?
Right.
That's going to be the value driver, the value buyer, excuse me. The value buyer is buying, we do things, right, proactively. The commodity buyer is going to be, where's the cheapest provider? So we're going to develop, and we can get to the right clients by developing deep focus on a specific market or industry. And so if we think about it, like I did a lot of, in the area that I did a lot of architectural firms. So we knew Autotask better than somebody else. We knew what they needed for data storage. We knew their printers, right? And we developed a reputation in that particular niche market. And then that got us to the next client and the next client and the next client. We were also able to really understand their key needs and their drivers. And so they felt comfortable that we understood it well enough that they would do business with us because they didn't have to train somebody, right? I knew when their big deadlines were going to be and what they meant to them in terms of revenue. So I understood their business better. Do we have a narrow offering, right? Am I trying to do all things for all people? There is a business for that, right? That is a business model, doing all things for all people. But there's also a better profit margin likelihood if I get very deep and narrow on one thing. And now I can train my team on being deep and narrow on one thing instead of being masters of everything, right? They're specialists on a few things.
Yeah.
And then do I have the ability to constantly grow with these clients? And one of the great things I loved in our area about having architectural clients was they kept growing. They went from being local to statewide to regionally to nationally, right? And so I grew with them, and that was a nice way for me to increase my growth without having to go out and actually sell a ton. But at the same time, do we want to make sure that we're refreshing their technology and thinking about that and providing that proactive service? So this leads back to the scaling, essentially.
And I had a question. I just lost it. It will come back to me, and I will ask you.
Happens to me all the time.
It's Monday, right? It's not, but it is.
Um, Service gross margin, which was one of the value drivers. If you have heard of C-level, and you have been to Beyond PAX 8, or even IT Nation in the past, you probably would have heard one of the C-level coaches or one of the PAX 8 coaches talk about the 4 levers of gross margin. Content is out there, it's available. This slide in here is really for understanding the 4 levers and making sure that as we think about building value in the company, that we're using the levers appropriately, right, to drive that value. And this goes back to the right client. If I have the right client, I'm going to be able to use these levers effectively. And if I'm building to scale, I'm even better off. So they're all related to one another. However, right, even if I'm in a time and materials basis, I've got the levers of price and cost and utilization. The more that I move these and work through them, right, the better off my profit margin on services will be. And people say, well, that's fine, but I sell a ton of product. I'm making good margin. The reality is that product is only going to get us maybe best in class 30% margin. Whereas service labor is a 50% margin game or better.
Yeah.
And if I'm using that 4th lever of efficiency and I'm using it to the right clients and I'm doing it to scale managed services, you should be able to get as high as 75% maybe, right? If you have it really well tuned and finely optimized.
Yep.
That's a big, huge difference in terms of gross profit and bottom line EBITDA.
Sales are just sales. I mean, the margin. I mean, that top line revenue might look exciting, right? If you're selling a ton of product, but if the margin is, insignificant um, to a potential buyer and to your valuation, it will make all the difference in the world. And
Yep.
and really, as what we talked about as far as deciding when do I plan to sell, what is your course of action then to get the right clients? Because revenue, not all revenue is good revenue. I know it sounds cliche, but there are things that we must do to essentially bring in the right clients and and move out those that are a drain on the future growth of the business, the ability to scale, but also the ability to have a strong valuation.
Yeah. I'm going to throw something at you a little differently. Like all revenue, I just like some revenue better than others.
Yeah, I like that. Yep.
Right. Um, but yeah, right. As we mature, and I think that's it's a great point to think about as we grow our companies. If you're a single owner operator right now today, and your vision is to be, $10 million and or to be sitting on the beach at some point, right? You're starting at a point. And when I start at that point, the actions and the things that I do are going to look different as I start to grow and go through this journey. And so I think what we're really saying, both of us, is that now as you go through this journey, don't be afraid to change to what is going to get you closer to your vision at the end. But don't stop doing what you do really well either, right? So you need to kind of have a combination of those two things. And that's the challenge. On top of, don't wait to make this change. Do it today. Start the plan to do it today, because if you say, I want to get out of this game in 5 years, and you haven't made that change, you got a lot of work ahead of you in the next 5 years.
And let me also throw one other thing out too. Life throws curveballs at us. We never know what's ahead of us. God forbid there's a health issue. Um, there's a change in, our life. And we need to look at exiting earlier than we anticipate. Um, that's just so critical. I mean, we don't know what's ahead of us. So planning now, today, tomorrow, get moving, is critical. Again, we may have a 10-year plan, but in best case scenario, that's a 10-year plan, but that 10-year plan might be 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. We had a operations person that worked for us um, a couple of years ago, and she had an interesting background, has an interesting background, I should say. And what's interesting about that is that her dad had a family business, and unfortunately, dad, passed away unexpectedly. And now, she and her siblings and her mom have to pick up this business and run with it, because it
Yeah.
it was good. It had a client base, but the right things weren't happening in it. And so it took a couple of years to stabilize that business to the point, right, with them working full time, to get it to the point that they could then sell it for something that would support the family, support the mother in this case, for a
Yeah.
long time afterwards, right? And so that's a really heartbreaking story.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it just happens too many times in our industry.
Absolutely.
Um, one of the things that we talked about in early on, financial driver, right? Having financial discipline, and how does it affect our values? Look, this goes to your point that you just made. I need to have my financials set up so that if something were to happen right away, somebody else can come in and go, I know exactly what's happening with this business. I know how healthy it is. I know maybe where it's not healthy, right? You run your financials every day like you're selling it tomorrow. It's just a best practice. And
Yeah.
that means having clean books, clean balance sheet. Try not to take on a lot of debt. Don't take on debt, actually. That's the preferable way of doing it. Making sure that you've got a predictable revenue and right expenses going on. We recommend having, right, the best practice for us is that we're looking at this on a monthly basis. We are measuring on a monthly basis. It's not once a year when I'm preparing for my taxes. It's not quarterly when I'm doing a benchmarking. It is all the time, every time. And it's kind of like keeping a clean desk for those of you that keep clean desks or messy desks, right? But
Yeah.
if it's clean and you know where everything is, you can find it easily. Same thing for our finances. If we keep it clean and we keep them really well organized, as if somebody were going to be doing diligence on us tomorrow, um, right, we're better off. That's a way we can add value. Companies will have a little bit of a ding on their valuation if the buyer has to unpack a hornet's nest of receipts. It's just a
Right.
matter of fact, right?
Yeah. And let's look at it from this perspective too, real quickly. Is it's The year's almost done. We're almost in the middle of December, and it feels like yesterday was January. So if you're looking at your books, it's been months that you've looked at your books. There's no time to make a huge impact on that when you wait.
If you're looking at even on the quarterly benchmarking cycle, oh, I had a bad quarter. You don't see that trend until the next quarter after that. And so
Right.
now you've got a negative trend. You're not going to fix that in 3 months or 6 months, right? It's going to
Yeah.
take another year. So if you look on a monthly basis, I see a bad month. Okay, maybe it was just a bad month. When I look at it midway to the next month, I say, "Ooh, no, that trend is continuing." You have the ability to make that change right then and there. And that is what the best in class are able to do. And that's what highly valued companies do on a regular basis. Okay, the big one, right? Because this one is like literally the money slide. If you don't have EBITDA dollars, if you have a low EBITDA percentage, you're going to get a lower valuation. So we're doing all of those other things to lead to higher EBITDA. And just to say like, oh, I'm at 5%. Okay, but why? There's a lot of reasons it can be why, right? Maybe we haven't raised prices in 3 years. Surprisingly, that's a very common response. Um, we have 10 technicians doing the work of 5, right? Our highest service delivery cost. We're not efficient in how we do our projects or we use our people. Um, maybe we're not selling. Maybe we're selling the wrong thing, going back to the right revenue, or we're selling it at the wrong margin, right? And then there's also the below the line things, our general administrative expenses. Are we watching those carefully? We got this nice shiny office. Was that the right thing to do last year? Or should we have maybe stayed in the old office a little bit more, right? These are all decisions and things that'll affect that. What I really want to draw here our attention to is 20% is 100% possible. We should be shooting for that. So evaluate where you are on that scale and know that you can be in that 20%. That 20% is going to have a lot higher valuation at the end of the day, a lot higher, likelihood of the business being run correctly to sustain that 20%. And so what does that mean when we look at best in class? The best in class are actually doing 23.4% last quarter. So they, right, are out earning the rest of the industry massively. And people all the time say, well, that's only the big companies. It's only the PE backed companies. It's only right if I'm in a metro area. No, this is across all clients, all people that do the survey information, which is a large number, right? There doesn't matter how big they are, how long they've been in business, how much the owner is getting compensated, right? What their client is, what the market is, who they're using for vendors. It doesn't matter. They're able to achieve this because of those 7 drivers that we've been talking about all hour long, right? They're doing the right things and they can achieve this value. The theme that we've been talking about all hour, start now.
Yeah.
Right? When was the best time to plant a tree? Well, it was 20 years ago.
Right.
Second time is today. So I just want to really encourage, everybody to think about that. One is right, over and over again, the pattern I see of businesses that outperform other businesses, they have a couple things in common. One is they know that they can use some help. They're in a peer group or talking to peers of some type, and they get a coach or somebody to help them through that. I don't know everything and help me figure it out. But if you're not going to do that, right, think about getting a true evaluation of your company. You need to know the baseline so you have an idea of where to go. So start with getting a true valuation and then make a plan and start that plan. I've talked to owners that, I talked to a year ago, and it's the same story. I'm too busy. My leadership team is too busy. We can't focus on that. right? They are now way behind. So I want to leave most people with, right? Get a baseline in place, make a plan, and start acting on that plan intentionally. And then that's really ultimately what's going to drive your valuation. Of course, talk to us about value creation coaching. There's that QR code there for everybody to take a look at. And it's worth a conversation, at least, right? And no two companies are the same way. We approach coaching holistically. What does the business need to do to move forward? What do you need to do forward as an owner? There's not a single client that we've engaged with that we do it always the same way. There's always variability. There's always changes and permutations, right? But believe it's possible and set that vision.
That's great. So if you use that QR code, you have the ability to use the value creation to get that valuation. And the other thing I want to make sure everybody's aware is that you can learn a lot more about, and I'm going to throw up on the ticker here at pax8.com/academy to learn more about Pax8's Academy services and how they can help any MSP grow and be successful. You know, you guys have a whole variety of solutions available. You have on-demand courses, you know, content to instructor-led training, peer
Yeah.
groups, coaching. I mean, uh, you know, it's truly a huge value. Is there anything else that you want to say regarding
Oh,
the
yeah. I mean, there is something we one of the mottos that we use internally, not written on the wall or anything, right? But that we really articulate internally in the academy group is we want to meet clients where they are. So whether I'm starting out as an MSP, whether I've been in business for a long time, whether I'm right mature and really at the top of the game, right? We're designed and we have a lot of different ways to engage with partners really to help them. Our success comes from their success. And even though, right, we're part of the larger PAX 8, we're really driven by helping the community of MSPs succeed. And right, we truly believe that. I said that was my personal passion. The people I work with, it's their personal passion. So if you're just kind of stomping around out there and you need anything, a little bit of anything, right? It's a great place to start.
Excellent. Brian, I want to thank you so much for your time. Very insightful, some great information. And I think the biggest thing that you said is start right away, start
Yeah.
today, because it will have a huge impact on your goals and objectives. And with that being said, Brian, again, thank you for everybody being here today. Thank you for listening to us. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.